Hey everyone, and welcome back for your daily roundup of global headlines. We've got a pretty intense news cycle today. Conflicts are escalating, we've got political dramas unfolding, there's extreme weather wreaking havoc, and believe it or not, a blast from the past in the fashion world. So let's get right to it.
Wow, sounds like we've got a lot to cover today. Where should we start?
Well, the situation in Syria is, it's taking a dark turn. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is reporting, well, they're calling them massacres. Hundreds of civilians are being killed along the Syrian coast.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it seems like pro-Assad fighters are clashing with Islamist-led rebel groups, specifically Hayat Tahrir al-Sham,
Right.
and it's the Alawite community that's caught in the crossfire.
And they're fleeing to a Russian military base for protection. Imagine that. Feeling so desperate that you're chanting for help from another country's military.
It's really a new layer of complexity in the Syrian conflict.
For sure. It pulls Russia more directly into the conflict, too.
Absolutely. And speaking of complex situations, the Ukraine-Russia conflict is, well, it's escalating pretty rapidly. Reports are coming in about intensified Russian strikes. It's tragic. At least 25 Ukrainian casualties. Some of them were actually rescuers responding to initial attacks.
Ah, that's just heartbreaking. And President Trump's decision to suspend military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine, well, that's not going to help.
No, not at all.
It's like he's openly saying he prefers dealing with Russia over Ukraine. I think that's making a lot of people nervous, especially our European allies who are, already trying to walk on eggshells with Putin.
Yeah. And the suspended intelligence sharing is a big deal. We're talking about access to vital satellite imagery,
Yeah.
the kind that helps Ukraine track Russian troop movements, anticipated attacks.
Right, right. Taking that away is a huge blow. It's like taking away someone's glasses in the middle of a chess match.
Yeah, I get it. It puts them at a real disadvantage.
A huge disadvantage.
Mm.
And then you've got Trump threatening large-scale sanctions against Russia, but at the same time praising Putin's actions.
Yeah. It's a confusing message, to say the least.
It really is. Makes you wonder what the U.S.'s endgame is here.
Absolutely. Let's move on to, well, a different kind of crisis. Argentina is facing catastrophic flooding right now. Bahia Blanca has been hit particularly hard. Over 1,200 residents have been displaced, and tragically, 13 lives have been lost.
I saw the images coming out of Bahia Blanca. Devastating. Roads and bridges just completely washed away. Homes underwater.
It's unbelievable. They got a third of their annual rainfall in just one day.
Wow, that's hard to even imagine.
It really is.
It makes you think about, how these extreme weather events are becoming more and more frequent.
Yeah.
You really need to be better prepared, invest in better infrastructure and disaster preparedness.
Speaking of preparedness or lack thereof, tensions are rising between Denmark and the U.S., and it all comes down to President Trump wanting to buy Greenland.
Oh, right. That whole saga.
Yeah. A decorated Danish colonel, Soren Knudsen, he actually fought alongside U.S. troops. He's spoken out about it. Said he feels hurt and offended by Trump's comments.
I can understand why. It feels like a betrayal, doesn't it? Like a real slap in the face to a long-standing ally.
Yeah, and it's led Denmark to increase its own defense spending.
Right. They're basically signaling they might not be able to rely on the U.S. for security anymore.
Exactly. It's a reminder that President Trump's actions, intentional or not, they can really have a ripple effect across the globe.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They strain relationships even with our closest allies. And it's not just political alliances being tested. Personal safety is also a concern. And this story out of India really highlights that. An Israeli tourist and her Indian homestay host, they were gang raped near a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Hampi.
It's a horrifying story. And while police have arrested 2 suspects, it really raises concerns about women's safety in India, particularly in tourist areas.
Absolutely. This is a huge blow to India's image as a safe destination, especially for women.
It is. It sparked outrage and protests, and rightfully so.
Definitely. This incident really underscores the need for better security measures, but also, a deeper societal shift. We need to change attitudes towards women.
Couldn't agree more. Let's move on to Myanmar now. The military junta has just announced that they're planning national elections for late 2025 or early 2026.
This announcement has been met with, well, skepticism is putting it mildly.
Yeah, a lot of people are seeing it as a way to legitimize the junta's rule.
Especially given all the violence and suppression of dissent that's still happening in the country.
It's hard to imagine how free and fair elections can be held in such a volatile and oppressive environment.
Right. The international community is not going to be happy about this.
No, probably not.
Uh,
And it could even lead to more unrest within Myanmar.
it probably will. And the timing of the announcement, well, it seems pretty calculated, doesn't it? I mean, international pressure on the junta was mounting, and now this. Seems like a way to buy themselves some time and deflect some of that pressure.
It does. Now, switching gears to South Korea, impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol has been released from detention. He was in there for 52 days.
Oh, wow. So what happened?
Well, the court overturned his arrest on technical grounds, but he still faces trial for trying to impose martial law.
Okay, so it's not over yet.
Not by a long shot. South Korea is still deeply divided over this. There have been huge rallies both for and against Mr. Yoon.
So this release is just going to add fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
The country's waiting for the Constitutional Court's final decision on his impeachment. It's a tense situation for sure.
It is, and it could have huge ramifications for South Korea's political future. Now, on a more somber note, we have news of the passing of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman. He died at his home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He was 95.
Hackman had an amazing career. So many iconic roles.
He really did. From The French Connection to Unforgiven, he brought such depth and humanity to his characters.
He was captivating.
He really was. His passing, it really feels like the end of an era in Hollywood.
It does. But in a bit of brighter news, Pope Francis is showing signs of improvement.
Oh, that's good to hear. He's been battling pneumonia and bronchitis, right?
Yeah, for the past 3 weeks. But the Vatican reports he's had a good response to treatment and is gradually recovering.
That's great news. He's 88 years old. And, you know, he's known for his active schedule and his commitment to social justice issues, so his absence has been felt.
Absolutely. Now, turning to a shocking event that happened in Toronto, 12 people were injured in a shooting at a pub.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, 3 suspects they just opened fire with, get this, an assault rifle and handguns. 6 people were shot and another 6 were hurt in the chaos.
That's terrifying. Another senseless act of gun violence.
It is. And the suspects are still at large. Police are calling it brazen and reckless. They've promised to use all their resources to find the perpetrators.
That's good. But until they're caught, there's going to be a lot of fear and anxiety in the community.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, for a story that really sheds light on the plight of migrants, Gurpreet Singh, an Indian man who was deported from the U.S., he's spoken out about how he was treated during his removal.
Oh, I heard about this.
He was shackled and chained.
It's awful.
It is. This incident has triggered protests in India. People are calling it inhuman and degrading treatment.
Rightfully so. This man's story, it really highlights the desperation that drives people to try illegal migration.
It does.
And the increasingly harsh policies that are being enforced at borders.
It's such a complex issue. But Singh's account, it really reminds us of the human cost of these policies.
It does. We need a more compassionate approach to immigration.
I agree. And now, for something a little lighter, Canada's Liberal Party is seeing a resurgence in the polls.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, it seems to be directly related to President Trump's recent trade threats.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, Canadians seem to be rallying around the idea of standing up to Trump, and this could have a big impact on the upcoming general election.
It could.
The Liberals are, well, they're highlighting similarities between Trump's and the conservative leader.
Smart move.
Yeah, trying to capitalize on that anti-Trump sentiment.
It's fascinating to see how international relations can directly affect domestic politics like that.
It is. And speaking of interconnectedness, there's a trend emerging in the world of fashion that's sparking conversations about body image and societal norms.
You're talking about the Free the Nipple movement, right? It's back.
It is. We're seeing celebrities on the red carpet, models on the runway, embracing sheer and revealing outfits.
It's definitely pushing the boundary.
It is. Charlie XCX even addressed the controversy surrounding her sheer dress at the Brit Awards. She said, "We're in the era of free the nipple, though, right?"
It's a statement for sure.
It is. Some people see it as empowering, a celebration of body positivity,
Right.
but others criticize it as attention-seeking or, a product of the pressures that women face to conform to certain standards of beauty.
It's complex, but it's interesting how fashion can be a reflection of these larger societal shifts and how it can spark important conversations.
It really is.
It does. And it raises questions, too, about who gets to decide what's empowering and what crosses the line into exploitation. And while we're talking about complex issues, there's a truly heartbreaking story unfolding for over 80 Afghan women. They were studying in Oman.
Oh, yeah.
And they're now facing deportation back to Afghanistan because of U.S. aid funding cuts.
It's just devastating for these women. They were pursuing higher education in STEM fields.
Hmm.
The fields that are now completely banned by the Taliban,
Right.
and the fear and uncertainty they must be feeling, it's just unimaginable. The dreams and aspirations, all that hard work,
Yeah.
it could all be crushed if they have to go back to such a restrictive environment.
It's a harsh reminder of, well, how fragile progress can be, especially in places where political instability and extremist ideologies are threatening basic human rights. These women, I mean, they took a leap of
They
faith,
did.
left their families, everything familiar, to pursue their education, and now that's been taken away from them.
It's a real tragedy.
Yeah.
And it highlights the collateral damage of political decisions,
Hmm.
funding cuts. I mean, they have real-world consequences. And speaking of political decisions having consequences, Canadians are, well, they're not just boycotting American goods anymore. They're taking things a step further.
Yeah, I've been following that. They're targeting American businesses and interests pretty directly now.
Exactly. Restaurants are taking U.S. items off their menus. Some provinces are putting tariffs on electricity exports to the U.S.
Mm.
And there's this growing movement to, choose Canadian-made products first.
It's really interesting to see. It's a form of economic activism. Canadians are using their collective power to push back against policies they disagree with. And it really shows you how strongly they feel about this.
It does.
It also shows how interconnected global trade really is and how political decisions can ripple through economies. These boycotts and the worries about a potential trade war, it's putting a strain on the relationship between Canada and the US.
And that relationship has historically been so close. So yeah, definitely a situation to keep an eye on. It could have long-term implications.
For sure. It's kind of a microcosm of what's happening with globalization. This complex web of economic and political ties that bind nations together.
So it seems like today's news is, well, it's a whirlwind of interconnected events. And they're all impacting each other in these unexpected ways.
It is, isn't it?
Mm.
Reminds you that we live in this complex world. Things are constantly changing. And what happens on one continent can have ripple effects that reach all over the globe. That's why it's so important to stay informed and to stay engaged. Because what happens in one corner of the world often ends up affecting us all.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, we've covered a lot today. From the tragedy in Syria to the encouraging news about Pope Francis's recovery, it's been a real roller coaster.
It has, but that's the world we live in, right? It's a mix of darkness and light, despair and hope.
It is.
We have to acknowledge both sides, the challenges and the triumphs, the setbacks and the progress. It's only by understanding all of that, all the nuances, that we can become more informed and engaged citizens.
And hopefully, by doing that, by staying informed and having these conversations, we can contribute to building a more just and compassionate world.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us today.
It's been great dissecting these events with you.
It is. And then you have the really unusual story with Gene Hackman. His wife, Betsy Arakawa, died from hantavirus just a week before he passed away.
Oh, yeah, I read that. Just awful timing.
Authorities think that because of Hackman's Alzheimer's, he might not have even, really been aware of her passing.
It's almost, I don't know, like an extra layer of sadness to the whole thing. It really makes you think about how fragile life is and how we deal with loss, especially later in life.
It does. Well, that's a heavy note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From the heartbreaking to the more hopeful stories. It's been quite a journey.
It has. The world never slows down, does it?
No, it doesn't. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We appreciate you tuning in.
It's always a pleasure breaking down these complex events with you.
Absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new set of headlines and, more insightful analysis. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, keep